I'm Sophie, 29, a self-taught ceramic artist with my first major competition tomorrow. 4 years ago, I left my exhausting IT project management job to pursue pottery, never imagining I'd compete against my sister-in-law, Isabella. My mother-in-law, Catherine, made her disapproval crystal clear from day one. What she did to my ceramic piece last night should have destroyed me, but instead I found something unexpected. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe and like if you've ever had someone try to sabotage your dreams. Pottery wasn't always my calling. For 7 years, I worked at a tech company managing complex projects, making excellent money but feeling increasingly drained. The chronic stress and shoulder tensions started in my 5th year. I'd find myself hunched over my computer screen at midnight, my neck screaming in pain as deadlines loomed over me like storm clouds. My doctor suggested finding a physical activity to counter all the desk work. I stumbled into ceramics purely by chance. A co-worker, Leah, invited me to one of those pottery wheel classes. I went reluctantly, expecting to make a complete mess. Instead, something transformative happened. When I touched that wet clay, my racing mind went quiet. My tension dissolved into the spinning wheel. For the first time in years, I felt my hands creating instead of just typing. I started spending my weekends bent over clay in our basement. My husband David seemed supportive at first. He'd bring me coffee while I worked, ask questions about my techniques, and praise my early, admittedly wonky attempts. "You have natural intuition," he'd say, even when my bowls looked more like abstract sculptures and my glazes turned muddy. After particularly brutal days managing impossible project timelines, pottery became my refuge. I'd lose myself in YouTube tutorials, learning about throwing, trimming, and kiln firing. I started saving part of each paycheck for ceramic supplies instead of the expensive gadgets I used to buy. The breaking point came during a massive system migration project. My workload became inhuman, and I found myself pulling all-nighters 3 times a week. One morning I collapsed from sheer exhaustion. David found me slumped over my keyboard, barely conscious. "This is insane," he said, carrying my limp body to bed. We sat down, went through our finances, and realized we could live comfortably on David's physician's salary alone if we adjusted our lifestyle. With his encouragement, I submitted my resignation the following week. The relief felt like breathing again after holding my breath for years. For the first year, I worked with clay purely for joy and healing. I converted our basement into a small ceramic studio, filling it with wheels, kilns, and the earthy smell of wet clay. David would proudly display my pieces when friends visited. "My wife, the potter," he'd say, his voice rich with genuine admiration. Then came the regional ceramics festival announcement. The Westridge annual pottery competition offered a substantial $5,000 prize and a featured exhibition in their community gallery. David saw the flyer at the hospital and brought it home. "You should enter," he said, placing it on our kitchen counter. "That's for real ceramic artists," I laughed. But secretly, the possibility took root. I developed my own style over time, creating pieces that blended functionality with emotional expression. My specialty became capturing the feeling of home through everyday objects. Bowls that curved like protective embraces, mugs that fit perfectly in anxious hands. For the competition, I chose to create a dinner set called Family Table, pieces designed to bring people together. Working on that collection became my obsession. I'd wake before sunrise to check pieces drying in the basement. I experimented with dozens of glaze combinations to get the colors just right. I made test pieces and prototype after prototype. For 4 months, every spare moment went into perfecting this single collection. The day my acceptance letter arrived, confirming I was one of 30 finalists, I screamed so loudly our neighbor Rebecca came running over, thinking someone was injured. Instead, she found me dancing around the kitchen, letter pressed against my heart. That's when things started to shift with David's family. His mother, Catherine, had always been politely dismissive of my little craft project. When David called to share the exciting news about the competition, her response was revealing. "How nice that Sophie has something to occupy her time since she's not working a real job." The dismissiveness in her voice was unmistakable. Even more complicated was the fact that David's sister, Isabella, was a professionally trained fashion designer with a degree from a prestigious design school. She taught fashion at the local community college and had several boutique collaborations under her belt. When she learned I'd been accepted to the ceramics competition, her congratulatory text felt forced. "Wow, they must have had quite a broad selection process this year." David started making subtle comments that hadn't been there before. Are you sure you want to put yourself out there like this? Or the competition will be really competitive, you know. Little seeds of doubt that I initially dismissed as concern. Despite these undercurrents, I remained optimistic. My ceramic collection was coming together beautifully. The family table set captured not just functional beauty, but the emotional warmth of shared meals. Each piece had its own personality, bowls that seemed to cradle food lovingly, plates that framed meals like artwork. The glazes flowed in organic patterns that reminded me of water and earth. As the competition approached, I felt increasingly confident. Several potter friends from my local ceramics group had seen my work in progress and seemed genuinely moved. One even remarked that my intuitive approach to form gave my pieces a warmth that reminded her of ancient pottery traditions. I allowed myself to dream about winning, about seeing my name in the local paper, about potentially launching a real career doing what I loved. Despite Catherine's barely concealed skepticism and Isabella's professional credentials, I believed my passion might actually be enough to make an impact. The week before the competition, I was applying final touches to my pieces. Each glaze application felt purposeful and right. The collection was speaking to me in a way none of my previous work had. For the first time, I felt like a real ceramic artist, not just someone playing with clay. That was before everything started to crumble. Catherine insisted on hosting a family dinner 1 week before the competition. To celebrate both my creative girls being in shows, she said, though her emphasis on creative made it clear who she considered the real artist. David and I arrived at her immaculate suburban home at exactly 600. Catherine greeted us at the door in her signature designer scarf, her silver hair styled to perfection. "Sophie, dear," she said, air-kissing my cheek, "you look exhausted." I imagine all that clay work must be quite taxing for someone not accustomed to physical labor. David's father, Michael, a gentleman who generally avoided family drama, simply gave me a warm handshake and a sincere smile. "Looking forward to seeing your ceramics at the show," he said, which earned him a sharp look from Catherine. Isabella and her husband Nathan arrived moments later. Isabella swept in wearing an elegant black ensemble with avant-garde jewelry that screamed professional designer. She embraced me with practiced warmth. "Sophie, so thrilled we're both showcasing our work. What are the odds?" "Pretty reasonable, actually. Considering there were 30 finalists and the competition specifically encouraged entries from diverse artistic backgrounds. But I kept that observation to myself. Catherine had outdone herself with dinner. The table was set with her finest china, crystal glasses sparkling under the chandelier. "I made lamb," she announced, "Isabella's favorite since she was a little girl." Throughout the first course, Catherine dominated the conversation with questions about Isabella's fashion collection for her upcoming boutique showcase. "Tell everyone about your inspiration, darling." Isabella pulled out her phone, displaying professionally photographed shots of her latest designs. They were sophisticated pieces in muted tones, technically flawless with impeccable construction and refined details. The collection explores the intersection of urban architecture and feminine vulnerability, Isabella explained using the kind of design terminology I still felt awkward using. The boutique owner told me privately that it's one of the most cohesive collections she's seen this year. "Of course it is," Catherine beamed. "You've been developing your aesthetic your entire life." "What about your pottery, Sophie?" Michael asked kindly, trying to include me in the conversation. Before I could respond, Catherine interjected. "Oh, I'm sure Sophie's pieces are charming too, for someone without formal training. It's so brave of you to put yourself out there against professionals." I felt my face flush. Actually, the competition welcomes ceramic artists of all backgrounds. That's part of what makes it meaningful. "Yes, they do need to fill all those spaces," Isabella said with a practiced smile. "It's wonderful they make room for hobbyists alongside career artists." David shifted uncomfortably beside me but remained silent. "Sophie, dear," Catherine said, refilling wine glasses, "aren't you concerned about embarrassing yourself? The judges will be looking for technical mastery that takes years of education to develop." "Mom," David finally spoke up, though his voice lacked conviction, "Sophie's ceramics are really beautiful." "I'm sure they are for her level," Catherine replied. "I just worry about her setting herself up for disappointment. The art world can be so harsh to amateurs." Throughout dinner, the pattern continued. Every comment from Catherine carried a subtle sting. Every response from Isabella contained carefully crafted condescension. By dessert, my confidence had taken serious hits. "Have you thought about what you'll do when this pottery phase passes?" Catherine asked as she served her renowned chocolate tart. "Most hobbies eventually run their course. It's not a phase," I said quietly. "I found something I genuinely love." "That's sweet," Catherine replied. "Though I do worry about you contributing financially to your household. Pottery supplies are expensive, aren't they, David?" David stared at his plate. "We're managing fine, Mom." On the drive home, I finally let my frustration show. "Why didn't you defend me?" "She spent the entire evening undermining my work." David sighed. "She's just worried you'll be disappointed. Fashion design is Isabella's domain, and Mom's protective of her." "Ceramics isn't Isabella's domain," I said. "It's something anyone can pursue. And I'm your wife. Shouldn't you be protective of me?" "You're being oversensitive," he said. "Mom means well. She just doesn't want to see you hurt when things don't work out at the competition." "When things don't work out, not if." David shrugged. "Be realistic, Sophie. Isabella has been in design her entire life. She has a degree in this. You've been doing pottery for what, 4 years?" His words cut deeper than Catherine's had. I turned to stare out the passenger window, watching streetlights blur past, and said nothing more. That night, alone in my basement studio while David slept, I stared at my nearly completed ceramic collection. For the first time, I saw it through Catherine's eyes. Amateur, sentimental, technically limited. I questioned every form choice, every glaze decision. But something determined inside me refused to surrender. Maybe I wasn't formally trained. Maybe I didn't speak the language of professional artists. But these pieces came from my soul in a way that Isabella's calculated designs never could. That had to mean something. I went to bed with renewed resolve. Catherine's disapproval and David's wavering support wouldn't stop me from seeing this through. I had something to prove now, not just to them, but to myself. 3 days before the competition, I was alone at home making final adjustments to my pieces. The doorbell rang unexpectedly around 200 in the afternoon. When I opened the door, Catherine stood there with a shopping bag, wearing an expression that attempted to pass for pleasant. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by," she said, stepping inside without waiting for invitation. "I brought some of those cookies David loved as a child." "That's thoughtful," I said, closing the door behind her. "David's at the hospital, though." "I know, dear. I actually wanted to see how your pottery was progressing. As family, I should show interest in your activities, shouldn't I?" The forced sweetness in her voice immediately put me on guard. But I led her to my basement studio anyway. My nearly finished ceramic collection sat on the shelves, gleaming in the afternoon light from the small windows. Catherine circled them slowly, her lips pursed. "Interesting," she finally said in a tone that clearly meant the opposite. "Very rustic, isn't it?" "It's handmade," I replied, already feeling defensive. She leaned in closer, pointing at my glaze work on the bowls. "The finish here is quite uneven." "Is that intentional?" "A stylistic choice. I developed my own approach to creating organic textures," I explained. "I see. Not traditional ceramic training, then." She straightened up. "The color palette is rather earthy, don't you think? Browns and greens. Very predictable." Each comment landed like a small blow. I took a deep breath. I was going for emotional connection rather than technical showmanship. "Emotional connection," she repeated as if tasting something bitter. "Well, I suppose that's one approach. Though the judges typically look for mastery of fundamentals first." She walked around to examine the other pieces. "Isabella showed me her fashion collection yesterday. The boutique owner who saw it said it represents a significant evolution in her design philosophy. Very sophisticated use of negative space." "I'm sure it's wonderful," I said tightly. "It truly is." Catherine sighed dramatically. "Sophie, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but have you considered withdrawing from the competition?" The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. "Withdrawing? Why would I do that?" "To preserve dignity, dear." Her voice took on a falsely compassionate tone. "Craft competitions can be so brutal. The judges will see immediately that you lack formal training. The comparison to professionally educated artists like Isabella will be unflattering. The competition specifically welcomes ceramic artists of all backgrounds," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, they say that to be inclusive, but we both know who actually wins these things." She patted my arm condescendingly. "I'm just trying to protect you from public humiliation." Something snapped inside me. "I don't need your protection, Catherine. I believe in my work." Her expression hardened. "This little hobby of yours has gone far enough, Sophie. It was fine when it was just something to fill your time after quitting your real job, but entering competitions against actual artists, you're setting yourself up for failure. Pottery isn't just a hobby to me. It's becoming my career. Catherine laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. A career? Be serious? You have no training, no connections, no gallery representation. This isn't a career, it's a delusion. Everyone starts somewhere, I insisted. Not at your age, they don't. Professional artists begin training as children. They don't wake up at 29 and decide to play potter. Her voice grew icier. You should quit now before you embarrass yourself and frankly embarrass this family. Embarrass the family? How would my pottery possibly embarrass you? People know Isabella is a serious designer. When they see your attempt alongside hers with the same last name, it reflects poorly on her reputation, on all of us. I could feel angry tears forming but refused to let them fall. I think you should leave. I'm just being honest with you, Sophie. These pieces, she gestured dismissively at my work, have no future. You have no future in ceramics. The sooner you accept that reality, the better for everyone. The front door opened and closed. Hello, David called out. Catherine's demeanour instantly transformed. We're in Sophie's little pottery studio, darling. David appeared at the top of the basement stairs, looking surprised. Mom, I didn't know you were coming over today. Just popped by to see Sophie's ceramics and bring your favourite cookies. Her voice was honey-sweet again. That's nice, he said, coming down to kiss her cheek. He glanced at my collection. How's it coming along? Before I could answer, Catherine said, I was just telling Sophie how different her approach is from Isabella's. So interesting to see the contrast between amateur and professional work. I looked at David, silently pleading for him to defend me, to say something. He cleared his throat. Mom has a point about the different approaches. Isabella's style is more contemporary. Not exactly the support I was hoping for. I should get going, Catherine announced. David, walk me to my car. I have something to ask you about your father's birthday next month. After they left the basement, I stood staring at my ceramic collection. Catherine's words echoing in my head. No future. Uneven finish. Embarrass the family. When David returned, I confronted him immediately. Your mother basically told me to withdraw from the competition to avoid embarrassing the family. He sighed. She didn't mean it like that. She absolutely meant it exactly like that, David. She said I should quit pottery altogether. She's just protective of Isabella. Design has been her thing since childhood, and Mom's worried about her feelings. What about my feelings? I demanded. I'm your wife. Doesn't that count for anything? David ran a hand through his hair. Of course it does, but you have to admit, Sophie, this is new for you. Isabella has dedicated her entire life to design. So I'm not allowed to pursue something because your sister got there first. That's not what I'm saying. Just maybe Mom has a point about the competition being too advanced for where you are right now. I stared at him, this man who had once encouraged me to quit my job to follow my passion. I can't believe you're siding with her. I'm not taking sides, he protested weakly. I'm just being realistic. Realistic would be supporting your wife's dreams instead of undermining them. David looked away. I'm tired. Can we not fight about this tonight? He left me standing alone in my studio, the gulf between us widening by the moment. That night, I worked until nearly midnight, fueled by a mixture of hurt and determination. Each piece I touched felt like an act of defiance. I would not quit. I would not withdraw. I would show my ceramics and let them stand on their own merits. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Rebecca, my neighbour, and one of the few genuine friends I'd made since leaving my corporate job. Just checking in, she said. I know the competition's coming up. How are you feeling? I found myself pouring out everything: Catherine's visit, her cutting remarks, David's failure to support me. What a horrible woman, Rebecca said bluntly when I finished. And shame on David for not standing up for you. Am I crazy for going through with this? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Absolutely not, Rebecca replied firmly. Sophie, I've watched your progress over these past years. Your work has heart. Technical skill can be learned, but you can't teach someone to create with soul. And that's what you do. Her words were like healing salve. Thank you. I needed to hear that. Your mother-in-law is trying to get in your head because she's terrified. People like her can't stand seeing others succeed in ways they never had the courage to try. After hanging up, I turned back to my ceramics with renewed clarity. Catherine's criticism came from fear and control, not genuine artistic assessment. I wouldn't let her destroy what I'd built. With 3 days left until the competition, I worked with focused intensity. shutting out the doubts she'd tried to plant. This collection represented not just my artistic journey, but my personal one from corporate burnout to someone brave enough to pursue authentic fulfillment. I would not let Catherine take that away from me. Not without a fight. The night before the competition arrived with electric tension in our townhouse, I was applying final glaze touches to my ceramic pieces' subtle highlights on the bowl rims, a delicate adjustment to the plate edges. Every detail had to be perfect. This was my statement to the world. My declaration that I belonged in that exhibition alongside trained professionals. The doorbell rang at 600. David answered while I carefully cleaned my brushes. "Mom," I heard him say, "what are you doing here?" I froze, ceramic tool in hand. I thought I'd come help Sophie prepare for tomorrow. Catherine's voice carried down to the basement. "And I brought dinner so you two don't have to worry about cooking on such an important night." I closed my eyes, gathering my composure before stepping upstairs. Catherine stood in our entryway, holding a casserole dish, looking every inch the helpful mother-in-law. "How thoughtful," I said, forcing a smile. "I hope you don't mind," Catherine said sweetly. "I know how stressful these events can be. Actually, I was just finishing up with my pieces. I'd planned a quiet evening. Perfect timing then. And I can stay overnight in your guest room to help you get ready in the morning. The drive from my house would be such a waste of time." David jumped in before I could object. "That's really nice of you, Mom." "Isn't that nice, Sophie?" His eyes pleaded with me not to make a scene. I swallowed my protest. "Very nice." Dinner was excruciating. Catherine dominated the conversation with stories about Isabella's previous design successes and thinly veiled comments about natural talent versus amateur dabbling. "Did I tell you that the boutique owner from the arts district called Isabella personally?" Catherine said, serving herself more vegetables. "Apparently her collection caused quite a stir among the fashion community." "That's impressive," I said neutrally. "It's the training that makes the difference," Catherine continued. "All those years of proper instruction. You can always tell when someone has the fundamentals down." I pushed food around my plate, appetite gone. "I think I'll turn in early. Big day tomorrow." "So soon?" Catherine asked. I thought we could all have tea and discuss how these events typically work. You know, for Sophie's benefit, since it's her first time. "I've actually researched the competition thoroughly," I said, standing up, "and my pieces need time for the final glazes to cure properly overnight." "Of course," Catherine smiled. "Amateur ceramic artists often struggle with firing schedules. Isabella uses professional studios that handle all the technical aspects." I bit my tongue. "Good night, then." In my basement studio, I spent a few minutes just looking at my finished ceramic collection. Despite Catherine's attempts to undermine my confidence, I felt proud of what I'd created. The family table set captured exactly the feeling I'd been aiming for: nostalgic yet contemporary, functional yet deeply personal. The glazes had that organic quality I remembered from childhood pottery, when handmade objects felt like they held stories. I took several photos of the finished pieces from different angles, something I always did with completed works. Then I carefully arranged them where they could air dry safely, protecting the final glaze layer. As I closed the studio door, I heard David and Catherine's voices from the living room. "I'm just concerned about her expectations," Catherine was saying. "The disappointment could be devastating." "She's worked really hard, Mom." "Hard work doesn't always translate to quality, darling. I don't want to see her humiliated." I didn't wait to hear David's response. I went straight to our bedroom and took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away some of the tension in my shoulders. By the time I got into bed, I was exhausted but too anxious to sleep. David came in an hour later, slipping quietly under the covers. "Your mother really shouldn't have invited herself to stay," I whispered. "She's just trying to help," he replied. "Try to get some sleep." I lay awake long after his breathing became deep and regular, my mind racing with thoughts about the competition. Around midnight, I finally drifted off into an uneasy sleep. A noise startled me awake sometime in the dark, early morning hours. A sharp crack like ceramic breaking, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. My potter's instincts recognized it immediately, the sound of fired clay shattering. Fully alert now, I glanced at the clock, 3:17 a.m. David was still asleep beside me. The noise had come from the direction of my basement studio. I slipped out of bed and crept silently down the hallway and stairs. A thin line of light showed under my studio door. Someone was inside. Pushing the door open, I found Catherine standing among the wreckage of my ceramic collection, a hammer in one hand, My pieces, my beautiful completed ceramics, were destroyed. Shards of glazed pottery covered the floor, months of work reduced to broken fragments. The pieces I'd lovingly shaped and fired were now nothing but colourful debris scattered across the concrete. "What have you done?" I gasped, the words ripping from my throat. Catherine spun around, her face momentarily registering shock before smoothing into concern. "Sophie, I was just looking at your pottery and accidentally knocked over the shelf. I was trying to clean it up." The lie was so blatant, so insulting to my intelligence, that for a moment I couldn't speak. "What's going on?" David appeared in the doorway, hair rumpled from sleep. "An accident," Catherine said quickly. "I couldn't sleep and came to look at Sophie's ceramics one more time. I must have bumped the shelf. Everything fell. I found my voice. She's lying. I found her deliberately smashing my pieces with a hammer." Catherine's eyes widened in feigned shock. "How can you say that? It was an accident." "Mom?" David looked between us, confusion clear on his face. "David, I swear I would never do such a thing." Catherine's voice trembled perfectly. "I was admiring Sophie's work." The shelf was positioned so unstably that it collapsed before I could catch it. I pointed to the hammer in her hand. "Then explain the hammer, David. Explain the deliberate destruction pattern." David stepped closer to examine the wreckage, then turned to his mother. "Mom, did you do this?" "Of course not." Tears appeared in Catherine's eyes. "How could you even ask me that, your own mother?" "The competition is in 8 hours," I said, my voice shaking with rage and despair. "She did this to ensure I couldn't participate." "That's absurd," Catherine said. "Why would I do such a thing?" "Because you can't stand the idea of me succeeding at something you never approved of. Because you're afraid I might actually win against your precious Isabella." "Sophie, you're being hysterical," Catherine said dismissively. "It was clearly an accident. These things happen." I turned to David desperately, needing him to believe me. "Your mother has been trying to sabotage me from the beginning. First with her words, now with this." David looked torn, his gaze moving from the shattered ceramics to his mother's tearful face to my desperate expression. I don't know what happened, but I'm sure Mom wouldn't deliberately destroy your work." His words felt like a physical blow. "You're taking her side, after everything she's said and done." "I'm not taking sides," he protested. "But Mom wouldn't do something like this intentionally." "Look at the evidence!" I gestured wildly at the destruction. "Look at the hammer in her hand!" "I was trying to move the broken pieces safely," Catherine insisted. David ran his hands through his hair. "Maybe. Maybe this is for the best, Sophie. The competition was always going to be a long shot." I stared at him in disbelief. "For the best? My ceramics are destroyed." "What I mean is," he fumbled, "maybe this saves you from potential disappointment tomorrow. You can enter next year when you've had more practice." The betrayal was complete. Not only had Catherine deliberately sabotaged my work, but David was actually suggesting it might be a good thing, that I should be grateful for being spared disappointment. "Get out," I said quietly to Catherine. "Get out of my studio right now." "Sophie," David began. "Both of you. Get out." Catherine placed the hammer down with theatrical care. "I understand you're upset about the accident. I would be too. Let's all get some sleep and talk about this in the morning when emotions are calmer." I said nothing, just stood rigidly by the door until they both left. Then I locked myself in the bathroom and sat on the cold tile floor, finally allowing the tears to come. 4 months of work, countless hours of careful shaping and patient glazing, all destroyed in minutes by a woman who couldn't stand to see me succeed. And David, the husband who had once encouraged me to follow this path, had chosen to believe his mother's obvious lie rather than stand by me. I cried until there were no tears left, my body shaking with silent sobs. When the emotional storm passed, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me had 2 choices: give up or fight back. For a moment, surrender seemed easier. Why continue this battle against people determined to see me fail? But as I looked deeper into my own eyes, something shifted. A quiet determination took root. Catherine had destroyed my ceramics, but she hadn't destroyed me. Not yet. Not if I didn't let her. Still locked in the bathroom at 3:00 a.m., I sat on the edge of the tub and pulled out my phone. Through tear-blurred eyes, I scrolled through my photo gallery to the pictures I'd taken of my pieces just hours earlier. The before images. My beautiful completed work contrasted cruelly with the shattered reality in my studio. But as I swiped through older photos documenting the collection's progress over the past 4 months, something unexpected happened. I stopped at an image from 3 weeks ago, before I'd applied the final decorative glazes. There was something powerful about that earlier version, something raw and honest that had become slightly subdued in my pursuit of technical perfection. The forms were bolder, the textures more expressive, the overall feeling more immediate. In trying to make the pieces perfect for the competition, I had perhaps over-refined them. Losing some of their initial emotional impact, a desperate idea began to form. What if I could start over? Not with the same pieces, but with something entirely new. Something that captured not just my love of ceramics, but the emotional journey of the past 24 hours. The betrayal, the determination, the defiance. I checked the time, 3:27 a.m. The competition check-in started at 900 a.m. It was impossible. No one could create competition-worthy ceramics in 5 hours. Or could they? I remembered Rebecca mentioning she'd be out of town this weekend, but had given me a key to check on her plants. Her townhouse, just 2 buildings down in our complex, had a basement workshop she used for various crafts. She'd offered to let me use it any time. Moving with quiet determination, I gathered essential supplies from my destroyed studio clay, basic tools, a portable kiln I'd borrowed weeks ago but never returned. I wrote a quick note to David, going to clear my head. We'll talk at the competition. Then I slipped out of our townhouse, the pre-dawn air cool against my skin. Rebecca's place was dark and quiet. I set up in her small basement workshop, arranging my materials on her work table. The lump of clay stared back at me, both terrifying and exhilarating in its potential. I had 5 hours to create something from nothing. Instead of overthinking, I closed my eyes and let myself feel everything. The hurt of Catherine's sabotage, David's betrayal, the years of condescension and doubt from both of them, but also my love for pottery, the peace it brought me, the sense of purpose I'd discovered. When I opened my eyes, I knew exactly what I wanted to create. I worked in a fever of creation, shaping clay directly with my hands, using bold techniques and intuitive forms. The pieces emerging were small vessels, but not ordinary ones. They showed hands reaching upward from broken fragments, faces emerging from cracked surfaces, forms that spoke of resilience rising from destruction. The technical execution was imperfect. Working this fast meant accepting flaws, embracing accidents, allowing the raw emotion to guide my hands rather than careful planning. But something powerful was emerging, something authentic in a way my destroyed collection, for all its technical merit, had never quite achieved. Dawn broke outside the window as I continued working. Sweat dampened my shirt. My back ached from hunching over the clay, but I didn't stop. Every form I shaped felt like an act of defiance against Catherine's attempt to silence me. By 8:15 a.m., I stepped back from my work table, clay-covered tools still in hand. The pieces weren't what anyone would call finished in the traditional sense. Parts were rough, some surfaces barely smoothed, but they vibrated with emotional truth. The vessels spoke of brokenness and healing, exactly how I felt in this moment. I carefully loaded the still damp pieces into Rebecca's car. She'd left me the keys for emergencies, grateful that the competition venue was only 15 minutes away. The clay would still be unfired when the judges saw it, a technical risk, but perhaps they would sense the urgency behind its creation. When I pulled into our apartment complex to change clothes quickly before heading to the venue, I saw David and Catherine in the parking lot, loading something into his car. They were deep in conversation, Catherine's hand on David's arm in that controlling way of hers. Neither noticed me as I parked in a visitor's spot and slipped upstairs. After showering and changing into my competition outfit, a simple blue dress I'd chosen weeks ago for this day, I headed back down. David and Catherine were still by his car, now joined by Isabella and her husband. All 4 turned as I approached. Sophie. David looked surprised. Where have you been? We were worried. I needed some space, I said simply. Catherine's expression was a carefully constructed mask of concern. Darling, we've been talking, and we all agree there's no shame in withdrawing from the competition after such an unfortunate accident. Withdrawing? I raised an eyebrow. Why would I do that? Confusion crossed their faces. Isabella spoke first. Because your ceramics were destroyed. David told us what happened. Yes, those pieces were destroyed, I agreed calmly. But I'm still competing. With what? David asked, genuinely perplexed. I smiled. You'll see at the venue. I need to get going. Check-in closes soon. As I turned to leave, Catherine caught my arm. Sophie, be reasonable. You can't possibly have created anything worthwhile in a few hours. You'll only embarrass yourself. I gently but firmly removed her hand. I guess we'll find out, won't we? The look of shock on her face as I walked away was the first moment of real satisfaction I'd felt since finding her in my studio with the hammer. David hurried after me. Sophie, wait, what are you doing? I'm going to the competition. Isn't that what everyone's been preparing for? But after what happened? After your mother deliberately destroyed my ceramics, you mean? He flinched. We don't know it was deliberate. I know, I met his gaze steadily, and deep down you know too. You just can't admit it. What did you make? He asked, changing the subject. Something true, I replied. I'll see you there. I drove to the venue alone, my new ceramics carefully secured in the back of Rebecca's car. With each mile, my resolve strengthened. Whether I won or lost today was almost irrelevant now. The victory was in showing up, in refusing to be silenced, in creating something authentic despite everything Catherine had done to stop me. For the first time since that family dinner a week ago, I felt genuinely free of their expectations and judgments. I had nothing left to lose, and that was its own kind of power. The Westridge Community Centre hummed with activity when I arrived. Ceramic artists in various states of nervous excitement unloaded their work, staff directed traffic, and early visitors milled about waiting for the exhibition to open. I carefully extracted my still damp pieces from Rebecca's car, using improvised carrying trays to avoid damaging the unfired surfaces. At the check-in table, a young woman with a clipboard looked up at me. Name? Sophie Crawford. She scanned her list. Crawford, here you are. You're in space 23, main hall, east wall. She handed me a participant badge. Your pieces look very fresh. I smiled. Completed this morning, actually. Her eyebrows rose. Bold choice. Good luck. Space 23 was positioned prominently between two other displays, a set of technically perfect vases on one side and a collection of sculptural forms on the other. I carefully set up my pieces on the provided pedestals, adjusting their positions to catch the light. As I stepped back to check the arrangement, I heard a familiar voice. Those aren't your competition pieces. Isabella stood behind me, her perfectly curated fashion sketches already displayed in her assigned space across the hall. She wore a stylish black jumpsuit that screamed professional designer, her hair arranged in an artfully messy updo. No, they're not, I agreed. I created these this morning, after what happened. Her expression was unreadable. They're different from your usual work. Yes, more immediate. I waited, expecting a cutting remark, but instead Isabella continued to study the pieces with genuine interest. The emotional content is quite raw. That was the intent. She opened her mouth to say more, but at that moment Catherine and David arrived. Catherine stopped short when she saw my new ceramics, her carefully composed expression slipping for just an instant to reveal shock and something that looked almost like fear. What is this? She demanded, recovering quickly. Where did these come from? I made them this morning, I said calmly, after the accident with my original collection. David stared at the pieces, confusion evident. You created these in a few hours? When someone destroys months of your work, you find motivation you didn't know you had. Catherine's face tightened. I told you that was an accident. And frankly, displaying these rushed attempts will only embarrass you. They're obviously unfinished. I met her gaze steadily. Art is finished when it says what the artist needs it to say. These pieces speak their truth. Other competitors and early visitors were beginning to drift by, pausing to look at the works. I noticed several lingering in front of my display, their expressions intrigued. Well, Catherine sniffed, I suppose the judges will be the ones to decide what constitutes proper ceramics. Isabella's fashion work is already generating buzz. As if on cue, a small group approached Isabella's display. She moved away to speak with them, leaving me with David and Catherine. Sophie, David said quietly, I wish you'd told me what you were planning. I was worried when you disappeared. Would you have supported me if I had told you? He hesitated, which was answer enough. That's why I didn't tell you, I said. I needed to do this without doubt or discouragement. The exhibition officially opened at 1,000. Judges, a panel of 5. Ceramic and design professionals began their systematic review of all 30 entries, spending time with each piece making notes on clipboards. I tried not to watch them too obviously when they reached my display, but I couldn't help noticing that they spent longer at my space than at several others. One judge, an older woman with silver hair and elegant glasses, asked me a direct question. This approach is quite immediate. Was that a deliberate aesthetic choice? I decided honesty was the best approach. My original collection was destroyed early this morning in an unfortunate incident. I created these between 3 and 8 a.m. as a response to that experience. Her eyebrows rose. Impressive commitment. She made additional notes before moving on. Throughout the morning, I observed visitors' reactions to the different works. Isabella's fashion sketches garnered appreciative nods and murmured comments about technique. They were undeniably accomplished balanced compositions, sophisticated design relationships, flawless presentation. But my ceramics seemed to generate something different. People stopped, stared, sometimes took a step back before moving closer again. Several returned for a second look. I overheard one man say to his companion, "There's something visceral about these pieces. They make you feel something." Around noon, I was getting a cup of water when I overheard two judges talking quietly in a corner, unaware of my presence. "The technical skill in number 17 is undeniable," one said, referring to Isabella's space number. "But there's something about 23 that keeps drawing me back." "Agreed," the other replied. 23 has an emotional authenticity that's rare. When the artist told Diane she created these just this morning after her original work was damaged, I was skeptical, but looking at them, you can feel the urgency and honesty in every curve. That kind of raw connection is what separates mere technique from art that matters. I moved away before they noticed me, my heart pounding. They had responded to exactly what I'd hoped to convey. The awards ceremony was scheduled for 300. As the time approached, the center grew more crowded. David found me near the refreshment table. "How are you holding up?" he asked awkwardly. "Fine," I said. "Better than expected, actually. Your ceramics are getting a lot of attention." "Yes, they are." He shifted uncomfortably. "Sophie, about last night." "I should have." I cut him off. "Not now, David. We'll talk about it later." Catherine and Isabella joined us as the exhibition director approached the small podium set up at the front of the space. Catherine looked confident, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from her expensive outfit. Isabella appeared more nervous than I'd ever seen her. "Ladies and gentlemen," the director began, "thank you all for joining us for the 19th Annual Westridge Creative Arts Competition. The quality of submissions this year was exceptional, making our judges' task particularly challenging." He continued with acknowledgements and thanks before getting to the awards. "The honourable mentions go to spaces 12, 8 and 4. None of us." Catherine's smile tightened slightly. "Third place with a $500 prize goes to space 17. Isabella Crawford for Urban Feminine." A polite round of applause. Isabella's face registered surprise and disappointment. Third place wasn't what she'd expected. Second place with a $1,000 prize goes to space 9. Marcus Chen for Digital Landscapes. Catherine's smile was completely gone now. If Isabella had taken third and neither of us was second. And first place, with the $5,000 prize and a featured exhibition next season, goes to space 23 Sophie Crawford for Rising from Ruins. The room erupted in applause. I stood frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. I had won. My 5-hour ceramics, born from betrayal and created in defiance, had won against professionally trained artists with carefully crafted submissions. Catherine's face was a study in disbelief and barely contained fury. Isabella looked stunned. David's expression was complex, surprise mixed with something that might have been pride or perhaps shame. As I made my way to the podium to accept the award, I caught snippets of conversation around me. Such powerful pieces. Emotional honesty you rarely see. Proves technique isn't everything. The exhibition director shook my hand and presented me with an oversized check and a small trophy. "Congratulations, Sophie." The judges were unanimous in their decision. "Your ceramics captured something extraordinary." When I returned to where David and his family stood, Catherine had composed herself, though her eyes were cold. "How fortunate that your original pieces were destroyed," she said quietly, almost as if it was meant to be. "Yes," I agreed, meeting her gaze directly. "Almost as if someone did me a favor by forcing me to create something new." She flinched slightly. Isabella approached, her expression complicated. "Congratulations, Sophie. Your ceramics are remarkable." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "Your fashion work is beautiful too." "But beautiful isn't always enough, is it?" she said thoughtfully. "I've been technically proficient for years, but I've never created anything that moved people the way your pieces do." It was perhaps the most honest thing Isabella had ever said to me. As the crowd began to disperse, a woman approached me. "I'm the curator from the neighboring City Arts Centre." Miss Crawford, I was wondering if you might be interested in showing some work in our gallery next month. What you've created here is exactly the kind of ceramics I like to feature. I accepted her card, a surreal feeling washing over me. This morning, I had been ready to give up on my artistic aspirations. Now I was being offered an exhibition opportunity. As we prepared to leave, I stood once more before my ceramics. Rising from ruins looked back at me vessels emerging from brokenness, refusing to be destroyed by it. In creating them, I had transformed my pain into something powerful. Catherine had tried to destroy me, but instead, she had inadvertently helped me find my true artistic voice. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. In the end, her sabotage had been the best thing that could have happened to my art. The days following the competition passed in a blur of congratulatory messages, interview requests from local arts publications, and a profound sense of vindication. The oversized check for $5,000 lay on our dining table, a tangible reminder that my useless craft project with no future had just paid more than a month of my former corporate salary. David and I circled each other cautiously in our townhouse, the unresolved tension from the night of sabotage hanging between us like a heavy curtain. We needed to talk, but I wanted to approach that conversation from a position of clarity, not reactive emotion. 4 days after the competition, I finally confronted Catherine. I drove to her house alone despite David's protests that we should go together. This was my battle to fight. Catherine answered the door in her gardening clothes, clearly surprised to see me. "Sophie, I wasn't expecting you. May I come in?" I asked calmly. She hesitated before stepping aside. Of course. We sat in her immaculate living room, sunshine streaming through lace curtains. Family photos adorned the mantel, many of Isabella with her various design achievements, only a few featuring David and none of me. "I think we need to clear the air," I began. "If you're referring to the accident with your ceramics..." "I've already explained what happened," Catherine said stiffly. "No, you lied about what happened," I corrected her. "You deliberately destroyed my work to prevent me from competing against Isabella. That's absurd. We both know it's the truth, Catherine. The question is why. Why did you feel so threatened by my participation?" Something in my calm demeanor seemed to unsettle her. Perhaps she'd expected anger, accusations, tears, emotional displays she could dismiss as irrational. My composure offered no such escape. "I was protecting my family," she finally said, her voice low. "From what, my ceramics? From disappointment. From failure. From false hopes." Her perfectly manicured hands twisted in her lap. "Isabella has dedicated her entire life to design. She's followed all the right paths, made all the proper connections. Design is her identity. And you thought I might win instead of her," I said, the realization dawning. "That's why you destroyed my ceramics. You were afraid I might actually succeed." Catherine's laugh was brittle. "Don't be ridiculous. You're an amateur. I never imagined you'd win." "Then why sabotage me?" She was silent for a long moment. "Because David was starting to believe in you," she finally admitted. I could see it happening. His wife, the ceramic artist, he was proud of you in a way he's never been proud of anything I've done. I raised him, sacrificed everything for him, and suddenly you were the center of his admiration. The honesty was startling. So this wasn't about Isabella at all. Isabella has Michael's support. She's always been his favorite, his creative daughter. Catherine's voice turned bitter. David was mine. When he married you, I accepted it because you were practical. A corporate career, sensible goals. Then suddenly you're a potter. And he's looking at you the way Michael looks at Isabella. The revelation shifted my understanding of the entire dynamic. Catherine's hostility wasn't just about ceramics or Isabella's status, it was about her own insecurity, her fear of losing her son's admiration. "What you did was wrong," I said quietly. "You had no right to destroy something I created, something that mattered to me. And yet you won anyway," she said, a hint of grudging respect in her voice. "I underestimated you." "Yes, you did. And you underestimated how much damage you've done to your relationship with David. He knows what you did, Catherine. He may not be ready to admit it yet, but deep down he knows." Fear flickered across her face. "David loves me. I'm his mother." "Yes, you are. But I'm his wife, and he's going to have to make some difficult choices about loyalty and boundaries going forward." I stood to leave, feeling strangely calm. I didn't come here for an apology. I came for honesty, and surprisingly, you've given me that. What happens next depends on you. You can continue trying to control David and undermine me, or you can accept that your son is an adult who made his choice of partner. If you choose the former, you may find yourself seeing a lot less of him. As I reached the door, Catherine called after me. For what it's worth, your ceramics, the ones you created that morning, they were powerful. I wouldn't have done what I did if I hadn't seen the potential in your earlier work. It was as close to an apology as I was likely to get. That evening, David and I finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding. I told him about my visit to his mother, about her admission and her reasons. She didn't actually confess to doing it deliberately, he said, still clinging to denial. David, I said gently, you need to decide what you believe and where your loyalties lie. I can't make that choice for you. He was quiet for a long time. When I saw your new ceramics at the competition, he finally said something clicked into place. The raw emotion in them, that doesn't come from an accident. It comes from betrayal and watching how people responded to them, how the judges saw something so powerful in them. I knew what Mom had done, exactly what you said, that I'd failed you by not believing you. His voice broke. I'm so sorry, Sophie. I should have stood by you. It wasn't an instant fix, but it was a start. We need help to work through this, I told him. I'm willing to try counseling if you are. He nodded, relief evident in his eyes. I'd like that. And I want you to know how proud I am of what you accomplished. Not just winning, but creating something so powerful under those circumstances. You're extraordinary. Over the following months, life changed dramatically. The Arts Centre curator from the neighbouring city featured my work in a small but well-received exhibition. Several pieces sold, including Rising from Ruins, which was purchased by a collector from San Francisco for 3 times the asking price. David and I attended weekly counseling sessions, gradually rebuilding trust and establishing healthier boundaries with his family. He started coming to my studio sessions and ceramic workshops, his support no longer wavering under his mother's influence. Catherine remained distant at first, but the dynamic shifted after Michael suffered a minor heart attack 6 months after the competition. Facing the possibility of loss seemed to soften her controlling nature somewhat. While we would never be close, we established a civil relationship based on mutual respect and boundaries. The most surprising development came from Isabella. Freed somewhat from her mother's excessive expectations, she reached out to me with an unexpected proposal, a joint exhibition exploring different approaches to creative expression. Working together revealed a more authentic person beneath the competitive facade Catherine had encouraged. We weren't friends exactly, but we developed a professional respect that would have seemed impossible before. My corporate skills proved unexpectedly valuable in my new career. I understood project management, marketing, and client relations in ways many artists struggled with. The business side of ceramics came naturally to me, allowing me to focus more energy on creating. A year after the fateful competition, I stood in my new studio, a converted warehouse space I'd rented with competition winnings and subsequent sales. Natural light streamed through tall windows, illuminating works in progress and bags of clay full of possibility. My phone chimed with a notification, an email confirming my acceptance to a prestigious national ceramics exhibition. Another milestone in a journey that had begun with Sabotage and ended with Vindication. The experience had taught me lessons I never expected to learn. That sometimes our greatest creative breakthroughs come from our deepest pain. That authenticity resonates more powerfully than technical perfection. That other people's attempts to diminish us often reveal their own insecurities rather than our limitations. Most importantly, I learned that believing in yourself isn't just motivational poster advice. It's a radical act of defiance in a world full of people who benefit from your self-doubt. I set up a fresh lump of clay on my wheel, prepared my tools, and began the first touches of a new piece. Whatever emerged would be authentic, imperfect, and entirely my own.